On this episode of Still Loading, Dragonfire or Go Home. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I am your host, Josh Koval, and today on the show, it is a modern game. Very seldom do I find the urge or find a guest who I would want to do a modern game with, but I have both today. The urge to cover a modern game and a guest that I think is perfect for this episode. So before we dive into the game itself, actually, first off, we're covering Kirby in the Forgotten Land, but more importantly, the guest that I have with me, my esteemed guest, is Morgan, Intergalactic Pinegone himself. Morgan Remington, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. How are you doing, man? I'm really happy to be here to talk about this with you.
Dude, thank you so much. We've been chatting a bit back and forth, trying to find a time to do this, and podcasting is scheduling is tough. So thank you so much for setting aside some time. It's kind of funny that we are recording this game right at this very moment. I'll tell you why. Literally right this very moment tonight. Do you follow Games Done Quick at all?
Games Done Quick? No, I do not.
Do you know what it is, or have you heard of it before?
That's the speedrunning thing, right?
Correct. So currently, right now, on Summer Games Done Quick has just started, and currently, they're about almost an hour in, approximately. They're speedrunning Kirby and the Forgotten Land right now. They're going to beat the game in an hour and 50 minutes or less.
Damn.
Right? That is, I mean, it'll go up on YouTube. Otherwise, I would say we should just go watch this and record a react. That would be interesting. Just do a live reaction podcast to a speed run of a game, like maybe like as a companion episode or something like that. That'd be kind of cool, actually. But I digress. Yeah, Kirby and the Forgotten Land being sped run right now as we speak, as we record. But before we dive into the game itself, Morgan, what is your experience with the game? I was going to say memories, but the game's not that old. It's only been out for about 3 months or so. What was your experience with the game like? How did overall impressions on it, and what made you want to play it in the first place?
Well, I have actually never really been a very big Kirby fan, but I am a big platformer. I am a platform streamer, I like to think. And Kirby and the Forgotten Land in particular is probably always going to be a very special game for me, not just because of the surprising amount of quality that I found within, but because this is the game that has really, more than any other game, this is the game that has helped launch the Twitch streaming for me. It has helped launch it to a new level. It's where we got our peak viewers. It's where we got a lot of our followers. And I think that this is a game that there's something so accessible about this, not only in terms of presentation, in terms of control, in terms of difficulty, but I think that you can really get a lot out of this title due to how, what's the word I'm looking for? The quality is so high that it feels as though it's been iterated on several times before. Even though this is the first kind of open-ish Kirby game, 3D based Kirby game, it feels very much like it could have been a sequel already. Like, it feels so tight. It feels so pristine. When I was done playing this on my stream, I kind of couldn't find anything to criticize about it. Not too big anyway, nothing major. And it's not every day you find a game like this that makes you feel the feelings that I was having. And it was a really special moment to share with everybody. And I'm glad I was able to do that. So I would say that my experience with Kirby, besides just being overall positive, besides just being fun, it's a very heartwarming game. It's a very, very special title that I think I'm always going to remember for the rest of my life. And I think it's probably one of the Switch's best, if not the best, in terms of platforming, that is.
I'm kind of with you. I don't know about in terms of it's the Switch is the best in terms of platforming or anything like that, but I do agree with you where it's hard to find, for me, to find criticisms of it. The game doesn't feel too long. It doesn't feel like it really stays out its welcome. Like you have only about 4 or 5 zones you have to fight your way through, so it's not like it's an incredibly lengthy game. But what's nice is that you can make it as long or as short as you want. Like if you really just burn through it and get the bare minimum number of Waddle Dees, then you can do that. You just have to beat the level. That's it. You just like you don't have to get the extras or anything like that. Um, you just collect the bare minimum number of Waddle Dees, and you can like I remember what is it? I believe the end of the game, I forget how many Waddle Dees, like the last level, I forget how many you need to unlock, but it's like a laughably low number because I think I remember seeing it was I it can't this has to be wrong. I remember it being 25, but I feel like I have to be wrong with that. That seems a little too low. I'm going to guess maybe like 35 or 40. It was still something that seems surprisingly low, that you probably actually collected the number of Waddle Dees needed by maybe the end, the midway through the second zone. So you can either streamline it straight through, or you can take your time, explore all the levels, have a lot, like see all what there is to offer, and also try all the different bonus challenges that help you unlock new power ups. It's a really well designed game. I'm with you on that. My experience with this game was I wanted to get it because I also don't have a lot of experience with Kirby. I own Kirby's Adventure for the NES. I don't own the original one for the Game Boy. I have a couple games for the DS itself, but by and large, I really haven't played another, like seriously played another Kirby game except for this one. And it was just wonderful. It was so it I've played other Kirby games and the difficulty seems a little bit too light at times, like when I've played it. This one, it just felt right. It just felt right. It was really well executed. So yeah, I'm with you on that. It's a game that I find hard to criticize because the things that I like, normally you go to, criticize its length. It's not too long, especially if you just want to burn through it. I would then maybe criticize its difficulty. It wasn't particularly insanely difficult even on wild mode, so I can only imagine what the original mode, like the easier mode, would be. The most difficult elements of the game for me was getting the challenge Waddle Dees. Like if you had to beat a boss without getting hit or something like that, like that type of stuff was the most challenging thing. But that's optional. You don't need to do that. So it's a really well scaled game, and it makes completion something that's fun and kind of like incentivizes it. It's just I don't know, I'm going down a rabbit hole now, but it's I agree with you, man. I had a very good first experience with it. But okay, moving on, let's talk a little bit about the development of the game. The game was started being teased in 2020. The general director of the Kirby series, Shinya Kumazaki. Okay, Shinya Kumazaki. I might edit some of that struggle out, but he described it as a new phase for the series, quote unquote, a new phase for the series, and that it will culminate all the best aspects of Kirby. They wanted to focus on making a 3D game because for the most part, Kirby's been a 2D series. They had Crystal Shards, Kirby and the Crystal Shards, which was like 2.5D. It was like a 3D game, but on a 2D plane
Yeah, I
type
just
of
played that
thing.
one recently. It's basically just 2D. They don't really take advantage of the other dimensional playing like Klonoa would. It's actually just another standard Kirby game from my experience. So this really was
Okay.
a share.
I've heard I was listening to another Retronauts, the podcast that I always shout out a lot, and they made up a good point where like Kirby is a circle, and that's the most number of polygons you can have for an object. Like at least with humans, it's like there are round things, but you can stylize like a humanoid design, so you don't need to have perfectly cylindrical things. Kirby is just a ball, so that eats up so much memory space and like processing power just to render a ball, especially on an N64. Like obviously now it's not a big deal, but back on the N64 when processing power was a lot more limited, I could totally understand why they're like, well, we can't make this open world or semi-open world like Forgotten Land is, because we just don't have the ability. We're putting too much processing power into Kirby itself, unless you want a more square-looking Kirby or like like a 3D hexagonal octagonal Kirby. Like that doesn't work, you know?
He did look a little bit jagged and crispy in the N64 game too. He wasn't exactly his normal Kirby self. He looks a little strange. All the characters actually look a little bit more stylized in that game. It's very, I guess, beautiful from a certain point of view if you're into that PlayStation 1 N64 aesthetic that I know a lot more people are kind of becoming nostalgic for. If you look at it from that angle, it's actually quite a beautiful game, even if it is not the perfect representation like on model of Kirby or whatnot.
Corners were cut, as they would say. Yeah, no, I get it. It was tough, but in all honesty, I'm happy with what this game turned out to be. I think right now Nintendo's in an interesting uh is an interesting place because I feel like because its games are so, and I don't want to bring the real world into this, but I've been over the last couple of years. I feel like one of the reasons Nintendo has been really successful, and it's not only because they make really high quality games, like in general, like they have their flaws, of course, but in general they make really fun, high quality games. But it's also because the world has become so polarized and so politicized, especially the weekend we're recording this. I mean, we're going to keep the real world out of this, but it's not been a great weekend. Let's just say that for us in the United States. So games like Kirby, I feel like Nintendo in general just has a bit of a leg up on the competition because their games are just so wholesome and so fun. It's so I hate using this term not because I have an issue with it, but it's become a little bit of a dirty term. But they're very apolitical. They don't really their games don't challenge your worldview. We'll put it that way. They don't challenge you emotionally usually, unless you get overwhelmed with happiness type of thing. Would you agree with that?
Kirby is also an interesting example to use for that because typically Kirby games are some of the only Nintendo games where there is kind of a darker portion towards the end, especially when you get 100% completion. Usually the final boss in Kirby games, it's become a running theme, and it's no different with this game. There's a little twist that makes it just a little scarier than you it might have expected from something that looks so kid friendly, especially in
Hmm.
this game for 100% completion. But I think that having a little small amount of well moderated, well executed fear, a little bit of danger, I think that's not such a bad thing, even in children's media, because that kind of exposure, those kinds of feelings that they draw out of you, it's very formative for a child. It's very formative for I can only imagine what it's like for a kid to play and beat this game right now. This will probably be one of their like core memories.
Oh, that'd
This
be
will affect
sad.
them a lot.
You're right though. Expect like you need to be able to experience those emotions in a in a safe way, in a
Yeah.
safe way in order to learn how to deal with them when when or if something happens. You know what I mean? Like yeah, that is a very good point. But what I was saying was like I just feel like because Nintendo in general is very happy. That's the best way I can describe it. Like their games just give off a happy vibe. They keep the real world out really well, and I think that almost like that's one of the reasons. Like, who would have thought that a Super Mario Strikers game would get a lot of hype, but the new one did because back in the day it didn't sell well, but now everyone's like, just give me something
Yeah.
to like help make me feel a little bit happier. And I know that sounds kind of like sad and desperate to an extent. I don't mean it to be because I don't think everyone who likes Nintendo is like that, but I just think you look at Nintendo and it gives you a warm feeling. And I think this game definitely benefited. It's deserves all the praise it gets at the same time. But I feel like Nintendo's in an interesting place right now where almost any game they put out right now is going to get some level of hype. Almost always.
In the case of that new Mario Strikers, unfortunately, the hype kind of fell flat. They sort of
Yeah, that's
let
what
that
I've
game
heard.
down, unfortunately. But nevertheless, that will improve in time, hopefully. And it's still something. It's still good that we got a Mario Strikers. It's better than it being relegated to being this obscure title on the GameCube that was forgotten
Hmm.
forever. So they'll work on that. And that's another good point to bring up about Nintendo. Even when they put out kind of subpar products that maybe don't meet expectations, they don't just usually abandon them. Mario Strikers, they already promised they're going to fully support. When Mario Tennis Aces came out on the Switch, that also had a lot of issues at launch. They also supported that. Same with Mario Golf. And there was one game in particular, Kirby Star Allies. Now, I have not been able to play Kirby Star Allies yet, but a lot of people in my chat were telling me, because I was saying, well, is this really like, should I go back and play Star Allies because I love Forgotten
Yeah,
Land so
yeah.
much? And they were saying that the DLC they added to Star Allies changes the game, makes it definitely worth playing. So I like that, even though Nintendo, they do try to imbue these feelings of kind of wholesomeness. And I think that even when they do miss the mark, even when they miss the mark, I do trust them more than other companies to go in and maybe fix these issues, because I know this probably isn't true, but the perception I have of Nintendo is that they're not always about the money. I know that they make very money oriented decisions, but I've also seen them make decisions that cost them money too. And I think that there's some sort of internal logic. I've been covering Nintendo for 2 years now. I used to be a Nintendo podcaster. There's some sort of internal logic I've discovered to Nintendo where there's a sense of decorum. There's a sense of there's a
Hmm.
sacred kind of feeling that I think that they have about themselves, a respect that they feel that they must, a level of respect they must maintain. And so when something damages their reputation, when something doesn't live up to their expectations, I do feel like more than other companies, they probably take it seriously internally. We saw all the criticism with Pokemon Sword and Shield. So what did they do with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? It's a full open world with a multiplayer based system. They're changing the formula, turning it on its head. That's what
Hmm.
is so great about Nintendo. Wholesome, yes. For children, yes. But not above reproach, not above criticism. And sometimes they pull through. And I think that in the case of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, this feels like an iteration of so many other games we've played from the before. The direct analog comparison that I make, the parallel that I make, is Super Mario 3D World and Kirby and the Forgotten Land, because these
Hmm.
games are almost the same thing, but there's a slight twist between them that I think puts Kirby and the Forgotten Land a notch higher in my book.
Interesting. I actually would go Mario 3D Land, or 3D World, excuse me, over this, but I still it's they're different enough where it's hard to compare. But I that's a good point you bring up about Nintendo with the fact that they are willing to go back and kind of fix some of their mistakes. I think a lot of that stems from, and once again, I got to give credit to them, Retronauts. I think this is an interesting point. Nintendo used to be a toy company. Obviously, it used to be a lot of different things, but right before it became the video game company, it was a toy company, and I don't think they've ever really. And Retronauts has pointed this out, and I agree with their observation. Nintendo never really lost their toy mentality. It's obviously not on the forefront. They're a video game company. They know that, but I still think they keep that toy mentality in mind. They kind of keep it in check to an extent. They keep it in the back of in the back of their heads, because it's like, look at amiibos. Like, amiibo is a very toy like idea. Look at it didn't do well, but I really don't like all the hate that it got online. But the Labo, I thought the Labo was such a cool idea. That's a very toy like idea. And the Mario Kart, where you build your own circuit now in the house, like, it's a very toy like idea. What's it? Not Super Circuit. That's the Game Boy Advance game, but Home Circuit or whatever it's called.
I've
Uh,
seen it in action. It's actually really interesting.
yeah, it's
You don't see the other companies doing stuff like that.
no, and also their collaboration with Lego. And
Oh
now I
yeah.
understand a lot of IP collaborates with Lego, but what Mario did that I haven't seen other IPs do is that they actually add, like, you can actually quote unquote play your Mario Lego creation. There's the Mario Lego like guy has a little scanner at the bottom of his feet, so when you land on excuse me, on specific tiles, you have to place stickers on them. But when you land on specific tiles, it will then it'll either make a different noise or cause Mario to say something. So if you land on a blue tile with this one thing, then you'll hear like a water splash. If you land on a red tile, then you hear a fireball or something along those lines. So then what's on crazy on top of that is, depending on how you build, you can upload, because there's obviously you can place coin blocks and stuff like that. Depending on how you build your level, you can then upload your run with the Mario guy onto leaderboards through the Nintendo phone app. There's like a Mario Lego phone app. Like, it's insane. Like, that's so much more in depth than anything else that I've seen with other IP with Lego. And once again, Nintendo has its fault. I mean, they just, what is it? Didn't they just do another cease and desist for a bunch of music somewhat recently, or
Yeah,
like
they're
they
taking
took down?
down. they're taking down a lot of classic music on YouTube from a lot
Yeah.
of people that have been uploading for up to a decade now, but they're offering no way to actually purchase the music.
And shitty thing that Nintendo's doing. No ifs, ands, or buts. Just because we're complimenting doesn't mean that they're not, like you said, they're not without reproach. Like
Yeah, I
they have
I've
flaws.
I've made a point on my new podcast. I've made a point of mentioning this right off the top. Nintendo obviously is my favorite company, number one, but they have really pointed things. There's really pointed aspects to them that I feel as though I have to speak out about, like, a lot. As much as I want to give them praise and I give them accolade, I mean, the Joy-Con lawsuits are still ongoing. The Joy-Con
Mm-hmm.
lawsuit never really got fixed. And if we're talking about what a potential Switch successor could have, the only thing on my mind is, will you guys just fix the Joy-Cons and not have them be so faulty and maybe be a little bit less shady, legally speaking? They just sent a guy to prison for 2 years, for emulation stuff. They're very
Wasn't that guy
anti-consumer.
selling ROMs though?
He obviously deserved it, but I mean to say, like, they go after people to the fullest extent. They're all about going after people that threaten their copyright, but they also are all about keeping things from people. And they're also all about kind of dictating their terms to you. Something I've noticed about Nintendo as I've gotten older, as time has gone on, is that Nintendo, I think, has this mantra of, we're going to try to innovate. We're going to try to make things that no one else is making, but we are going to dictate terms, and you're going to play this and enjoy this the way that we see fit. And you see it a lot in the balance patches that they put out. You see it a lot in the lack of online features, like Splatoon 2. You can't even make a lobby with your friends and, like, invite them. They
It's
just put
so
out
strange. Yeah.
they just put out an online invite system on the Switch. They just put that out, and it only
Five
works
years
with
into
Mario
the
Party.
console's life cycle.
I know, it makes no sense, and it doesn't work with every game, and it's not universal. It's on a game by game basis. So yeah, they're great. I love Nintendo. They do some not so great stuff. They,
I
they
mean,
act in a anti-consumer way.
unfortunately, they've been that way for quite some time. I mean, if you look back on the NES, like they had pretty much a monopoly on the North American video game market because of their business practices. If you wanted to publish on Nintendo, you couldn't publish with other people. You had to buy your cartridges from Nintendo, not from a cheaper third party seller. If you wanted to buy from that, if you wanted to, you could only publish 5 games a year, which I think that was actually a good idea because that, like, now it's not as much of a problem, but back then, right after the North American video game market crash, it was a smart thing to do. Once again, I've said it before in other episodes, very clear: North American video game crash. The video game market did not crash outside of North America. It is a uniquely North American thing in 1983.
That's the whole reason Rob the Robot exists. They wanted to sell Nintendo as a toy. That's the only
Yep.
way they could convince
Once
people in
again,
North America to do it.
back to their toy like mentality. But in any case, that's a whole lot of like little tangenting before we start the game. One last thing I want to bring up before we talk about the game itself is just some of the people who've worked on it. I'm not going to list the entire credits because it's hundreds of people, but we're at least going to look at the top 3 credits on Moby Games: the general director, the director, and the level design director. The general director was Shinya Kumizaki. He is. I just figured it'd be interesting to see what other games he has worked on, and he has worked on, for the most part, everything Kirby. I mean, like it's a very Nintendo thing. Like when you do something, you're with that thing. So he has worked as kind of like the producer, which is kind of like what the general director is on Smash Bros. Ultimate, which kind of makes sense because Kirby is in that. Kirby Star Allies in 2018, Kirby Fighters 2 in 2020, and obviously Kirby in the Forgotten Land in 2022. But then prior to that, he worked as a designer on Super Kirby Clash, Kirby Battle Royale, Kirby's Blowout Blast, Team Kirby Crash Deluxe, Kirby Planet Robobot, Kirby Triple Deluxe. Like, I'm not going to read all. It's literally all Kirby. The only games that he had. Oh, he also worked on Kirby's Air Ride as the art graphics guy in 2003, which is kind of cool.
Hmm.
The only stuff that I can see that he has done that is not a Kirby game is that he did Box Boy on the Nintendo 3DS, which is like a 2D puzzle game, which actually I've heard good things about. I'm kind of, like, looking at it now, I'm very curious about it. I think I still have some cash left over on my 3DS. I know the stores, you can't add funds to it now, but I might try. If I have enough money, I might buy it um, before the store closes for good. But so that is Shinya Kumazaki. The director, the overall director was Tatsuya Kamiyama. His credits, once again, tons and tons of Kirby stuff. Kirby Star Allies. This was actually the first game he directed, though. Maybe not, because it says he's under design. He's listed under production for Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and it's lists him as director. But then Kirby's Blowout Blast in 2017, um, that's listed. That also lists him as director, but it's listed as him under design. So that's interesting. So it's actually not his first game as director. Moby Games is just confusing with how they list things, but he also worked on Box Boy. So it seems like a lot of the Kirby team worked on Box Boy. And finally, the last person I wanted to bring up is the level design director, Yuki Endo. Yuki Endo has worked on a lot of Kirby stuff, as well as, per usual, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Star Allies, Planet Robobot, Triple Deluxe, blah, blah, blah. He also did the art and graphics for Box Boy. Oh, there's a couple of games in the Box Boy series. There's like Box Boy plus Box Girl, Bye Bye Box Boy. So he's worked. It seems like a lot of the Kirby team has worked on this Box Boy series. Interestingly enough, he did animations for WWE 2K17 and 2K18.
Wow.
That's very interesting to me. Like, it's all of the only other game that's not Kirby that he's worked on was Need for Speed V Rally in 1997. Everything else, it's Kirby or WWE. Just very strange to me.
It's interesting that all these people that you've mentioned, they all have such a long lineage with Kirby. Maybe it's because of that this game was so good. I just wonder, this game in particular, more than any other Kirby game, really stood out to me. Really stood out to me, especially in terms of its level design. I wonder
Hmm.
what something had to have changed, I think, in the background. There is some X factor to this game that I don't really understand. Because the typical feeling I get when I'm playing Kirby is generally I'm just not very invested. They're very cute games. They're very adorable games with, great graphics, sound, and whatever. But I never really feel a part of it. I certainly don't feel this resonance that I feel with Forgotten Land. So it kind of makes me I have this idea in my head of like what was happening behind the scenes with all these Kirby veterans. What made this change? What made this different? Was it directive? Was it a directive from up above? Was it something internally? There had to have been there's just so much behind the scenes I wish I knew about what makes this special.
And it's tough for us to know right now because the game is so new, and Nintendo is notoriously, infamously tight-lipped about everything internal for their company. So you have that combined with the fact that it only came out 3-ish months ago. Like, you're just not going to really get that much info out. Like, I only reason I even went over the designers because I couldn't find a whole lot of other development background about the game itself. But I thought it would be interesting just to at least see the pedigree, who worked on this game. But I think now's a good time to dive into the gameplay itself. We can talk about the plot, talk about the gameplay, its mechanics, all that good stuff. The overall plot of the game is kind of interesting. Like, it's basically the premise is Kirby's planet Popstar gets sucked into a vortex that appears over it, and they show up in this place that's called the New World, and it looks a lot like our world, like abandoned shopping malls and abandoned skyscrapers and stuff like that. And they get to the New World, and he discovers that the Waddle Dees from Dreamland have been kidnapped by all the native wildlife there. It's called the Beast Pack, and he eventually finds the destroyed Waddle Dee town, and he has to go around and rescue Waddle Dees. And he also meets a character named Elflin, and Wikipedia lists Elflin as a chinchilla-like creature. Would you think Elflin is a chinchilla-like creature?
It kind of does look like there's a Pokemon in Generation 5 that's based on a chinchilla. It looks just like that actually in terms of its design.
Okay. I mean, my wife used to have a chinchilla years ago. I wouldn't I I kind of see it. To me, it reminded me more of like a flying like a monkey. I not necessarily in like the face, but like just the overall design of Elfilin. So you Kirby and Elfilin have to make their way through this new world to save all the different Waddle Dees and beating the different quote unquote council members of the Beast Pack. And you don't really know why the Beast Pack is that like trying to do all this. And we'll get as we kind of talk through the game, we'll talk about like what the plot twist at the end of the game was. Now, actually, Morgan, did you play all the so you know how like when you beat the game then it opens up like another galaxy of like harder levels to go through? Did you play all those as well?
I did everything. I got full 100%.
Is there another plot twist when you beat that area too? That I don't mind if you spoil it if there is. I was just curious if there was because I beat the game, saw the credits roll, and then they open up that new area, which is just harder levels. But I didn't try that yet.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a plot twist. It's more like a final resolution that just kind of ties everything together, and I think gives a more complete and happier ending to everybody. Because it's kind of like left in the air at the end of the regular ending, but there's a lot of finality to the 100% ending.
Okay, we'll definitely have to talk about that then because I don't know what it is. So as you kind of go through, you do meet King DTD. Event, yeah, they discover King DTD, which is interesting because normally DTD is the villain of almost all Kirby games, or he's a rival of Kirby, and this time, like they're still kind of fighting each other, but he's not the main villain in this game. So it gets once again, you know what? I shouldn't say once again. Let's just make sure we make this very clear. There will be spoilers in this game. If you're very curious about Kirby storylines, which no offense to you, I would be surprised if someone cares that deeply about Kirby's plot spoilers. It's not like these stories are anything amazing. No offense to the writers either. It's compelling, that's for sure. But I don't know if it's anything that's like this isn't The Last of Us where you don't want spoilers for that. You know what I mean? This is Kirby. But you have to track down King DTD because he has kidnapped Alphalin because I don't. Do you know why DTD did it? Is it just because they're rivals? I forget all of a sudden.
DDD is under control from
Okay.
the thing that's controlling the Beast Pack, because the Beast Pack are not like villains typically. They're being controlled by that creature, that life form.
Yes. Well, we can just dive right into that plot twist because the story in the game is not that overly complicated. You are trying to rescue all the Waddle Dees so that way you can rebuild Waddle Dee Town. Um, and you're kind of chasing after what is hold on. You're trying to defeat the Beast Pack because Elflin tells you like they're the ones that are attacking us, and like if you can save us, so you're doing it to save Elflin and the good creatures of this new world, and you're also doing it to save all the Waddle Dees. And obviously, you find out that it's not all that it appears to be. It's not all that it seems. You find out that there was a basically there is Elflin is one half of this crazy warrior thing. It's called what is it? I guess called the Morpho Knight. Is that the official name for it?
Oh, yeah, that's one of the bosses you fight at the very, very end.
It's not. Oh, no. It's you. Elphalus. Is that the? I think Elphalus is the
Yeah, that's the life form.
that's the life form, and so you find out that Alphalus was split into two, and it was one half was Alphalin, and the other half was essentially Chaos. Was its name Chaos? I don't remember.
No, I don't remember its name either. Whenever you fight these bosses, it shows you like the full text of what their name is on screen, and it was like a big, huge like subtitle and all this stuff. And there's a lot of information. I don't remember any of that. The
Oh,
important thing
Soul
is,
Forgo. Soul
yeah, there you go.
Forgo is the name of the villain. So Chaos Alphalus is the big final villain. That was the original thing that crashed to this earth and like destroyed the world. So scientists separated, and you get the nice half of it, Elflin, and then the evil half is Sulfurgo. And Sulfurgo is the villain that possessed all of the Beast Pack. Leon Gar. I love all the names though. Leon Gar is a good name. What's the other? What are some of the others? Like, what was the monkey's name? I'm blanking on
Gorimondo. I'll never forget Gorimondo.
Gorimondo. What a great name. Uh, you defeat. You're basically, the whole idea is you don't want him to take Elfilin back so that way they can merge, very Dragon Ball Z style. You don't want them to be able to fusion ha together. Spoiler alert, they do, and you still have to. So you have to fight them, and it's a tough boss fight in my opinion. I think the final boss fight's pretty damn tough. What do you think? And we'll get into details specifically, but just like, did you find the final boss difficult?
Yeah, the final boss. I was trying to challenge myself when I was playing on stream to not use power ups for the bosses. So that final boss without power ups was pretty tough. That was a pretty hard challenge, but it was very rewarding. It felt very fair. It was actually kind of akin to learning the pattern of like a Dark Souls boss. It was very you fight that boss, and then later for the 100%, you fight an even stronger version of that boss. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like the building blocks. You start to learn a little bit more as the fight goes on. It was a very intensely difficult fight, but it was really rewarding, and I'm glad that I put the time in. You know.
Yeah, but unlike Dark Souls, this game actually respects your time. Sorry, I'm very salty towards Dark Souls. I have lots of issues, as you've seen on my streams.
Yeah,
I'm not going to talk about that too much. That is a hot button issue with a lot of people. People love them some Soulsborne games, and I don't think it's my thing. I think I've tried it. I gave it a good. I mean, logged what 10, 20 some odd hours into it or something like that. I forget how
yeah.
long I've played.
It's fair if it's not your thing. You know, like we've there. I forgot which series it was. There's Final Fantasy VII remake. Like it's so critically acclaimed and lauded, and I just can't do it. So I totally know how you feel. Like there's this huge ultra popular thing. Everyone says it's really great, and you just can't identify with it. You know, it's
You
just part
want
of
to
life, I guess.
you want to hear something nuts?
Hmm.
I recorded. I was telling you off mic about a podcast that I recorded on A Link to the Past, not for my own show, but for another show. I'm not going to say which show it is because it'll spoil the episode. But one, the host, uh, huh, the one person on it. I'm not going to say if it was a guest or a host because that would also spoil it. The one person on it, because there's multiple guests on it, hated A Link to the Past, and I was in shock. Did not find any enjoyment about it. I was legitimately shocked when I heard that. Like I understand it. Just it surprised me because not because that they didn't like it. It's because I thought that would be a kind of game they would like. It seemed like it was something up their alley, and it just wasn't, and it just shocked me. So I
Yeah,
get it.
it's interesting because it's Link to the Past. I think really rewards a lot of that exploration. It rewards a lot of the paying attention to the finer details. But you know, some people are just really not into that. They really just want the curated, in your face, guided experience. And I think I can see from that point of view why
Well,
they might
Link
like
to the
that.
Past, that pretty much is that. It's a very curated, guided experience. Compared, like the original Zelda is a lot more open, and
Yeah, yeah,
obviously
for
Breath of the
sure.
Wild is much more open. Link to the Past is very much Ego Raptor. I thought described it really well. It's a lot like Disneyland. It's like it kind of like it doesn't necessarily hold you by the hand in each area, but it highly encourages you into specific areas of which way to go. Like it's kind of
Yeah.
like go to this amusement park ride, go to this amusement park ride, that kind of thing. That's kind of like what A Link to the Past is. But anyway, so I mean that's overall the pretty much the story. Kirby shows up into a different world. They pretty much needs to rescue all the Waddle Dees and help Elflin save this planet from the Beast Pack or whatever their face is. Yeah, the Beast Pack. You find out the Beast Pack is actually being controlled by an evil entity called Forgo Dreams, and you find out that it was created by Fecto Forgo's lingering soul and populated by phantoms generated by their memories of the Beast Pack. That's very confusing. But basically, you find out it's a supernatural being, and if it combines back with Elfilin, then it turns into this super being that you would have to fight. And so you want to avoid that. Spoiler: they don't, but it doesn't matter anyway because you beat them, and that's pretty much the game in a nutshell. Now, Morgan, what is when you 100% the game? How does it kind of close out the story with this?
Well, you close out the story right before you 100% it, because 100%ing it involves like getting all the collectible figurines.
Oh
So
God.
yeah, um, they give you an extra world at the very end where it's like, okay, go into the remixed versions of the normal levels and collect the fragments of the lion's soul. So you wake the lion back up and get him out of the control of this creature. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you beat it, you finally reunite the Beast Pack and everyone is all together and you're all friends again. And you defeat the final form, the Morpho Knight, which is like a butterfly. It looks like Meta Knight, but with a butterfly mask. And you do
Mm-hmm.
like a one-on-one duel with that guy. And then later, it gives you like another tournament where you fight an upgraded version of the final boss of the game. And that's really where the challenge comes in, because it's got an upgraded move set. It's tougher. It's you only have like one life. You can't like just retry it over and over. So it's pretty rough. But I think that the story itself concludes, I think, before you get the 100% completion. So it's not like something you have to invest a lot of time to. The 100% completion literally just gives you a screen saying that you did it. You know, for me
Okay.
that
Okay.
for me that was good. For other people, that won't be as good. As long as you just go do the extra world that they give you at the very end, that's you'll probably get
What? But
enough
what
content.
does it? But what story beats does it like? How? What does it wrap up with that little extra bit after the if you play through the extra world?
Oh, well, because at the end of the regular ending, the lion's like in that little pod. He's not
Mm-hmm.
awake yet. You just collect the soul fragments and you wake him up and you just reunite him with his family, and then everyone's good.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's adorable.
they pose for like a picture too. So
Okay, okay. Now that actually kind of incentivizes me to go back and try that out. But let's dive into the gameplay itself. We are 41, almost 42 minutes into recording, and we haven't even talked about the gameplay yet. I'm honestly amazed we've gotten 40 minutes out of what we have so far, and that is a compliment and a testament to our ability to talk about random stuff, and I love it. So gameplay. This the Kirby games are well known, obviously, for their core mechanic generally is that you get additional abilities by sucking up enemies. So, actually, the first game didn't have this ability, which I always find interesting.
yeah,
The first Game Boy game did not have this. But ever since then, it's been known that, Kirby will suck up an enemy, you get its ability, and then you find like a little cute version of Kirby's wearing a cutified version of whatever it is. He's got an adorable sword, a cute little hat, whatever it may be. And, you then get those powers and you can use those powers until it's kind of been knocked out of you or you die in some way, shape, or form. Now, I don't know. Like you're saying, you haven't played many other Kirby games, but maybe is this the first game that has upgrades to those abilities?
as far as I know, yes, I haven't seen that before. I mean, the only thing I've seen close to that is Kirby 64, where you combine abilities, but that's not exactly an upgrade. That's just a combination. So this feels very fresh, at least from where I'm standing, where Kirby is involved.
Hmm. There is a ton of different abilities that you can choose from, and I guess I don't know, there's too many really to break down every single individual one in like detail in terms of what mechanics are good and bad and blah blah. But let's just read. I'm going to read off all of these real quick, and then I want to get your opinion on what some of your favorites and least favorites were. So you have the Ranger copy abilities, which you have we'll go through all the evolutions of all these as well. So you have the original Ranger, you have the Noble Ranger, and then the Space Ranger. You have the Hammer ability. So you have Hammer, Toy Hammer, and Wild Hammer. You have the Crash copy, which is there's only two versions of this. You have Crash and Time Crash. You have the Fire ability, which is Fire, Volcano Fire, and Dragon Fire. You have the Cutter ability. Out of context, that might not be a good name. But you have the Cutter ability, with Chakram Cutter and Buzzsaw Cutter as that abilities upgrades. You have the Sword ability, and then Gigant Sword and Meta Knight Sword. You have the Bomb copy ability or the Bomb ability, and then those upgrades are Chain Bomb and Homing Bombs. Tornado ability, Floor Tornado and Storm Tornado. You have the Drill, or the Pencil Drill, and the Twin Drill. The Sleep ability, which is sleep and deep sleep abilities. Needle, Clutter Needle, Crystal Needle. Then you have Ice, Frosty Ice, Blizzard Ice. And apparently there's a couple like end game abilities, like hidden end game ones. I don't Did you get those, the end
Yeah,
game abilities?
you get the
So you
Morpho Knight set.
Morpho Knight, and there's also a masked hammer.
Yeah,
Um,
it's DDD's hammer. It's DDD. He has the beast mask on, so you get like the
okay.
super powered up version of it.
Okay, okay. So I did not know. Oh, that's kind of cool that there's those extra abilities that I did not know about. So there's a lot of abilities, and what's kind of cool is that I mentioned each of the abilities. I read all of them off and all there's evolutions. If you each for by and large, each evolution does more damage and usually also increases the rapid fire, the the frequency in which you can use the ability, which is cool. But they also change kind of the functionality of the ability. Like each ability and its evolutions almost have different mechanics as you play through it. We don't have time necessarily to break down all of the mechanics for each of the different evolutions for all the ones I just listed, but I do think it's worth noting that the mechanics change depending on which evolution you have. And what's kind of cool is as you get more evolutions, you can go back and still use the older ones. It's not a permanent thing. So if you really liked the original needle ability more than the crystal needle ability, which I don't know why you would, but if you really like that, then you can go back and use the original needle ability. You're not beholden to the upgrades, which I really like.
Not to mention, there's like there's those small little side challenges that are off to the sides of the levels where you get the extra treasure, and each one of them is curated to specific abilities. And I think that also does a really good job of making every single ability kind of important in its own way, because if you're going for 100% completion, you pretty much need to do all those little side challenges to get as many of that star currency as you possibly
Mm-hmm.
can. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that something about the level design, something about the way the game is presented to you, that's very important to distinguish with these abilities. An issue I've had with Kirby games in the past is that typically to get to 100% completion, you would need to have foreknowledge of which ability you need to bring into a level and what to do with that ability. This game kind of eschews that. It foregoes that. You have those side challenges curated to specific abilities, but for the most part, when you have a platforming challenge or a puzzle in a stage, they will just give you the ability near it or before it or slightly after it. You're not like locked out just because you didn't know. It feels very
Mm-hmm.
organic in the way it's designed. It feels very well thought out, and I really appreciate that extra detail. I think that's just flat out good design. I didn't have any intention of 100% completing this game. I just couldn't get enough of it. That's why I did it. And I think that the way that it was laid out for me, with the power ups specifically and the challenges and the stage design, it does a really good job of guiding the player without any tutorials, guiding the player naturally through gameplay alone, which is a very important pillar of gaming to me personally.
I'm with you on that. I think there's only one time that I had like the one time where there was an ability that was not anywhere in the level and it required it to get the extra waddle dees, and there was it was later in the game and there was one with the time bomb, or you no sorry you had to use the normal. So time crash is like the upgraded one, the regular crash hat or whatever it is. You had that's like it was like a single use thing. You could only use it once in the level, and if you did, then it usually just took out everything on the screen. And you needed to do that to take out a boss.
Yeah.
So you had to basically run through the opening segment of a level without getting hit or using the ability, and then make it to the boss and use it. So it was a decent challenge, but if you don't know, you wouldn't know what that challenge is until you've unlocked all the others, because the nice thing is it at least tells you like what challenges are left. Like if you play through a level and you don't get all the challenges, it will flip over one of them and keep the others a mystery, so you at least have a direction to go. And if you're lucky, if you figure out the others as you play through, that's even better. It's a very good feeling when you're playing through a level for the first time and you get everything on the first run through, because you just happen to find all the challenges and you've done enough exploring for all the challenges, which is cool. This one specific one, which I honestly can't remember um where it what oh actually, you know what, now that I think about it, there is so I didn't know this. You copy this ability from the bomber, which are the little like nose
Mhm.
diving bombs. And the level I'm thinking of, there is one of those on. I remember specifically where it's at. It's on like the corner of this like you're kind of climbing up this spiral like square staircase, and it's on the corner of one of the staircases, or like climbing up. So I apparently just never found out that you could get the ability. I'm glad I looked this up. But
Yeah, there's a couple
okay,
of cases where they have you do like find the invincibility directly before the boss, find the bomb directly before the boss, but it's like slightly hidden. So you kind of have to
yeah.
you gotta like be very observant. I missed both of those as well the first time I played it.
You know what? I actually kind of take back my criticism then, because I was saying you wouldn't have known about the crash thing beforehand, which is true, but I didn't know that you could even I didn't think there was any way for you to get the crash ability within the level to do that. And now I know there is. So I kind of take that back. Like if you happen to suck up that enemy and get its ability, then you might not have known about it still, but at least it gives you it within the level. So that's a little bit better than what I thought it was. What are some of your favorite abilities within in this game?
Well, if you're going for 100% completion, that means that you have to go fight the final ultimate, what do they call it? Ultimate Z tournament. And it's like 50 fights or something like that. It's a lot of fights.
Oh,
And
jeez.
it ends with the final upgraded version of the final boss. You
Hmm.
just kind of need to have the morpho ability that you get from doing everything, because the morpho ability is actually really multifaceted. It's not just an upgraded sword attack. You can heal yourself by landing consecutive hits. Being able to heal yourself without a healing item is just so huge. It's such a game
Hmm.
changer. And so it's like it was purposefully handcrafted to like barrel through these longer challenges to kind of keep yourself alive. And so it becomes this risk reward thing where like the riskier you play, the closer you get to the enemies and actually land hits, you're keeping yourself alive. And so it becomes this very fast paced kind of frantic energy that this thing gives you. It's probably the best ability in the game just in terms of survivability. But besides that final upgrade that you get, I think that what I found when I was going for the hidden objectives for the bosses, like, you know, killing them in like under 2 minutes, killing them without getting hit, I really think that the hammer power up was really good, because if you learn the boss patterns and movements, you can charge up a fully charged hammer and just smack them with it. You take off chunks of their health. It's a really rewarding and fun way to play the game, to have this kind of balance that you're doing of hitting and dodging, hitting and dodging. And it was kind of like, it reminded me of playing a fighter. Something about Kirby's movement in this game and the abilities reminded me of playing as a fighting character. And especially with the dodge he has and the block, he can guard and he can dodge, which slows time down. And that combined with the abilities is like, that's beautiful. It was excellent. It was a lot more depth than I was expecting from something like this.
For me, it's actually Dragonfire, hence the a little intro at the beginning. Um, hence the cold open, I should say. And that's because if you light an enemy on fire and you kind of like you because you can keep hitting them with fire over and over and over again, and if you hit them with fire enough, then they stay on fire and they keep taking hits. So
Mm.
like if you remember the one boss Clawroline or whatever, the cat that jumps up into the rafters of the
Oh yeah.
circus, you could light her on fire and then she would jump up to the rafters and still be on fire and still taking hits, even though
Oh,
you can't reach her anymore,
interesting.
unless you had the ranger ability. So I always really liked Dragonfire. The only issue I had with it, and it wasn't the game's fault, it was just my own, is that sometimes if you jump and then you hit the one button, it like does a dash attack with it. And I killed myself more times than I care to admit by accidentally dashing when I was trying to like get Kirby to just get rid of all the, just drop quickly. But that's not how it works. Like I had hit the wrong button and then Kirby would dash instead of just dropping to the ground and like, let the air out of himself and get back to the ground. It was very, very frustrating to say the least. So I really liked that. The Wild Hammer one I did really enjoy, but I didn't like having the timing. I'm not a fighting game fan, so I think that probably has something to do with it. And it's because I like to be able to just to mash buttons and mash attack, and you have to be very calculated with the Wild Hammer. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a cool mechanic. I actually beat what is it? I think one of the bosses you had to beat with the Wild Hammer to get a Waddle Dee, and I found that it was actually the easiest way to fight this one boss. I forget exactly which one it was, but once you got the hang of it, it was pretty straightforward and pretty easy. So I liked that one. I liked Dragonfire. I also really liked the Meta Knight sword. Like once you get the Meta Knight sword, that was really fun to do. It did a lot of damage and it was so fast. Your attacks were so fast and I loved it.
The great thing about that Meta Knight sword, you can do an uppercut with it, throw them in the air, and then do a spinning attack and kind of throw them back
Hmm.
down to the air. You can like combo with it. It's really interesting. Very, very fast. I can see, I used to kind of wonder why are they making these Kirby fighting games, like that they have on the Switch. I think that Kirby and like his power-ups, they just sort of lend themselves to that kind of environment. And I definitely felt a lot of that influence here in the way that Kirby controlled and the way that Kirby fought his enemies. It was really refreshing to be able to play, especially coming off of like I've been streaming Mario 3D World. Coming off of something like that, this game feels a lot more aggressive rather than passive, and it
Hmm.
rewards really aggressive yet like calculated, perfected platforming and timing, which I really, really appreciate. I got a lot out of it.
I also really like that you mentioned before about the individual like challenge levels, and you
Mhm.
like them because it wasn't one of those situations where you could get into a level and didn't realize that you needed a power up to do some secret bonus thing. Um, I like those levels. But you make a good point with that. That it is cool that they kind of incorporate that idea of like using a specific item for a specific level, and but making it so it's obvious, like it forces you to use it. I like that. I also like it because it showed you different mechanics with it that you might not have figured out yet, or you may never have figured out through your playthrough. Specifically for me, like the buzzsaw ones, where if you one of the mechanics that you can do with it is that you can shoot the saw out, and if you hold the attack button, the buzzsaw blade will stay hovering in the air, and then you can move around to another side, and when you let go, it sucks back to you. So you could like shoot it on a lot of the puzzles they would do. You would shoot it through a hole in the fence, and then you would have to hold it, run over to the other side. So that way, instead of it going straight back to you through the hole in the fence again, it would shoot off to the right or left side of the screen and hit some type of a switch. And I had no idea you could do that. Similarly, the needle copy ability, I didn't know that you would pick up speed every time you essentially rolled over an enemy while you were in like the needle ball, and that was a really cool thing once you understood how that worked. I did not understand that, but I learned that from the challenge levels, and I thought that was a really cool mechanic. It wasn't necessarily my favorite to play with. It was a little clunky, but I still really enjoyed the idea, even if I didn't enjoy doing it, if that makes sense.
This game is really like all meat, no fat. The fact that they're able to do like equal parts tutorial, equal parts like here, use every single ability in the game to its fullest, and if you don't know, you'll figure it out here. I really think that it takes a lot of I guess it takes a lot of belief in your own systems to be able to do that and not feel like you're wasting people's time or to feel like you're not bloating the game at any point. And
Hmm.
I think that they must have known they had something really good on their hands because when I think about sometimes playing certain platformers, when I think about getting a full completion or using all the abilities or heaven forbid upgrading every ability, when I think about that kind of time commitment, it seems like something that would be very grindy, something that would be not enjoyable. Like, this is just for completionists. This is not really for someone like myself. But this game, I think, more than many other games, modern games anyway, that I've played, balances that so well and makes it something that is not only fun for you to do in terms of a meta kind of analysis, in terms of like, oh, I want to get all I can out of this game. It's more like just for the fun of it. Like you have that natural inclination and curiosity to say, what can this do? There's more to this than I think. And that's the kind of player discovery that I feel Nintendo really excels at. And clearly, I think this Kirby game has really tapped into.
I'm with you on that, and I'm not always the type of person that likes to 100% games either. Just it's so much work. It's so much work to 100% games. There has to be a game that I'm hooked on in order, like Ghost of Tsushima. I 100%ed that one because I just had so much fun with it, and when it ended, I was like, I want more. Kirby. I didn't 100%, but I had the drive to. And a lot of the reasons that I didn't is just generally I'm just busy between podcasting, parenting, and all that other stuff. But I really enjoyed my playthrough of this game. And I think that it, you don't like, even now, like I'm on a wiki site, I'm on IGN, and it's going through all the different abilities. That's how I was able to list them all. And some of them, like the sleep copy abilities, I had no idea what the purpose of those were for the longest time. I now realize that the normal sleep one is it heals you, but I was, because the first time I used it I was at full health, so I was like, what's the purpose of this? Is it just going to hurt me? Like, if I use this around enemies, I'm screwed. So why would I do that? But then deep sleep, the upgrade to it, allows it so that you can go to sleep whenever you want to. And the normal sleep one is like, as soon as you get the hat, you're just passed out. But the deep sleep hat is you can choose when you want to do it. And if Kirby, what is it? So deep sleep differs from sleep in that Kirby can go to sleep manually rather than as soon as he gets it, so it's more practical to use. If Kirby sleeps the whole way, they will also receive a health extension or an attack speed buff for 200 seconds chosen at random. It will still disappear after one use. I did not know that. I
That's
never
the
used I
that's the
never used the
strategy.
initial one.
The
I never used
strategy
the
is
initial one. Yeah.
you go into the world tournament, you get the sleep ability first before you enter the door. You get the buffs, and then you go and buy the buffs. So you go into the tournament with the buffs, but you also have them stocked in your items. So you get it for free,
Mm.
and you can stack them on top of each other. That way, you can be fully buffed for the whole tournament. It's really good.
I never would have thought about that. So what are some of your least favorite abilities that you've encountered that you played through with the game, or did you enjoy all of them?
That cutter is really the only thing I don't like. I just never felt like the cutter. I don't really like throwing it because I feel like I could have already killed them by sucking them up or shooting a block at them. The cutter takes too long for the thing to physically hit them and actually do meaningful damage. If I'm gonna be range, I might as well just be ranger because at least then I can be ultra ranged, very far back.
Hmm.
The only reason I would take a ranged option in this game is for extreme safety. There was a couple bosses. I think it was the DDD rematch. There's the DDD rematch where I was trying not to get hit, obviously for the challenges. I use Ranger for that, and if I'm thinking about using Cutter, it's like, why I wouldn't do that? No, like I just keep me as far away as possible and do the most optimal damage as possible. And sometimes it's not really just about doing the big numbers; it's about how consistent can you keep the damage going. Cutter for
Yeah,
me
yeah.
didn't really, besides like those challenges you were talking about where you like will hold it in place and flip a switch or whatever. Besides those specific instances, I found no use for it personally, and it just wasn't a favorite of mine.
It's funny, like I actually really like the cutter ability, but I also didn't find a lot of use for it. It's weird. Like it's one of those ones where I like it, but I never really used it. For me, it was the bomb
Mhm.
ability, and also the drill. The drill was useful. They had gameplay mechanics out of it, but it is awful for combat. It is not effective for combat, at least in my opinion, because you can only do, you do an attack and you dive underground, and then you do an attack again when you pop out, so you have to be very specific with your timing for it, and it doesn't do a lot of damage to warrant the slow attack speed for it, at least in my opinion. At
Yeah, I
least
pretty
like
much
with the
only use that for
hammer, yeah, at least with the hammer, it was slow, but there was a reason for it being slow. It did a shitload of damage, and so you kind of pick your strategy to whatever suits you. The drills just never really felt useful for me. Now they did have ones where like if you would, as you popped out, it would shoot like an extra pencil tip and it could like hit other enemies, but even so that's kind of random, and it really didn't do all that much damage. For me, the drill was definitely my bottom, followed closely after that by bomb, chain bomb, and homing bomb. Like, bomb was cool at first because it was kind of like you can kind of go bowling with them, bowling with bombs. That sounds like a band name. Um, Bowling with bombs was just fun, but then the chain bomb thing, said to get them to chain reaction was so difficult to do mid game, because like if you're running away from something, you can't, and you have to spin around to attack it. Good luck chaining those unless you're like unless you have a lot of practice with it. The homing bomb was fine, but it just, at that point I was just kind of done with it. So for me, those were two of my least favorite abilities. But you know what, Morgan, we have buried the lead. we've been going on and on about the story. We've been going on and on about some of its designers. We haven't talked about the newest mechanic, the primary selling, like what they sold the game to us on, mouthful mode.
Yeah, mouthful mode.
It's wonderful.
It's
It's such a
horrifying, but it's wonderful.
yes, it struck a very delicate balance that they only Nintendo could pull off, because any other normal thing like absorbing a car or a traffic cone or a vending machine, it would be terrifying. But they their art team, man, it works. It really works for this game. And the mechanics that it adds, specifically the wind tunnel thing, like the little circle that does turns Kirby into like this wind cannon, that was really fun. I also really like the oh my gosh, what is it, the vending machine where it like launches out cans of like soda or whatever, or cans of drinks at enemies, and you have a certain number of cans that you can shoot out, but you can also pick up more. I referenced this on another podcast. I think I referenced this on Tokyo Game Life. One of the things that I love that really showed me Nintendo's attention to detail with this game was in mouthful mode when Kirby sucks up a car, because it could have very much just been like, it's just a pink car with wheels, right? And you just kind of see this like matte like tarp over it, but Kirby's legs are still dangling by the tail lights, and you can drive around like that, and you just see his you see his feet flapping in the wind. It's really dumb and weird, but it's kind of adorable. I don't know, man. What are your thoughts on mouthful mode?
It is horrifying and grotesque to look at, but it's perfectly in keeping with Kirby as a character, Kirby who
Mm-hmm.
eats everything and anything. Um, I really was partial to the race car Kirby. I really like the race car Kirby a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the cone Kirby actually has some really fun puzzles where you're like balancing off of water and like breaking the ground and stuff. I like that a lot. But I think that the light bulb Kirby is really super adorable, because when you're turning off the light bulb, you can still see the warmth of the light like illuminated and around his pink like flesh. It's a really nice little attention to detail there, and not to mention it's actually like not a total. I think what the important thing to bring forward here is that none of them feel like a chore to use, which is I'm
Yes.
very thankful for that. They all feel very they were always welcome additions to the levels whenever I saw them. I never got the feeling of, oh crap, we're doing this again. I was excited to see how they would change up the variation. There was there's also the roller coaster Kirby, where you would
Mm-hmm.
go and like turn left and right and get the different power-ups and stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
uh I really like how basically any standard level could just sort of turn into like, here's a small set piece for you. I think they must have designed this game and thought to themselves, there needs to be something to break up the action, something to kind of break maybe small moments of monotony. And I think that these mouthful mode power ups, they definitely fit the bill. And I kind of wonder, it was making me think when I was playing it, like, what could they do after this? Because I feel like maybe the next step for them is to just introduce more. Like maybe there just needs to be even more mouthful mode transformations. I think that certainly it's there's something really playful about the idea of thinking about everyday items and objects being used for different gameplay mechanics. It's kind of like something that you would imagine as a kid, like you're bored
Mm-hmm.
in class one day and you're thinking to yourself, what in this freaking classroom can uh, expel the feeling of tedium that I have, and you just start imagining different everyday random objects in the classroom as being power ups. That's what it kind of feels like to me, and thematically and gameplay wise, I think it works perfectly for Kirby.
I wonder if they'll do like a Mega Man type of thing and put it out to the audience to be like, pick a new mouthful mode, and we'll like who the winner of the with the best idea will get their idea in the game and maybe like a free copy of it or something. I don't know. That would be kind of cool, right? That would be
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I wonder what people would come up with, what monstrosities they would make.
well, Nintendo is going to have to go through a whole bunch of dick joke ones, of course. That's going to be first and foremost. They're going to have to sift through a mountain of dicks. Uh, I mean, just because people, it's especially in the age of the internet, and like back when Mega Man did it, it was all kids for the most part writing in. So unless the kid had like a more adult sense of humor, they probably weren't sending. I mean, I'm sure Capcom got some, but like the vast majority, I don't think it would have been dick jokes. Now everyone and their mother plays Nintendo. 40-year-olds down to 2-year-olds play Nintendo. So you're gonna get really cute, innocent, adorable ones, and then you're gonna get penises, and that's pretty much all it's gonna be.
Not to mention just the deluge of people that just bandwagon on Twitter just to make something grotesque for the sake of it, just because they can, just to, even if they're not even interested in any of it, you know?
Like the it's like when someone puts a poll out like name my boat, and they're like it's Bodie McBoatface, which I'm always for because it makes me laugh, but it's clearly just meant to be like this is dumb, let's all vote for it. I mean I would love to see it, but I just can't imagine people. I would love to see it because I think it would be it's perfect for Kirby, but I wonder if the logistics would just be very difficult to do.
Also, Nintendo could just Nintendo themselves and say, no, all that stuff is gone forever. You already got all that stuff in Kirby and the Forgotten Land. No more. You'll never see Mouthful Mode again. You
Either
know?
that or put a poll out and then say like have like they're cycling through like 6 ideas and like which one is your favorite, and they kind of put it out to the community. That might be a little bit more manageable. You wouldn't get any dicks,
Mm.
and you would also not get like you wouldn't have to like painstakingly read everyone's response or the vast majority or a large portion of the people's responses. Uh, no, I'm with you though. I love the little car mode. I actually completely forgot about the roller coaster version. I would say if I had to pick one that I wasn't the biggest fan of, it would most likely just be like the glider. And it's not because the glider wasn't fun. It's just that those levels weren't always my favorite. Actually, the roller coaster ones I also wasn't that big of a fan of because everything came by so fast. It was very easy to miss switches because it was just going so fast. So I would actually say roller coaster more so than the glider. But the car one was fun. The cone one was fun, especially if some of the challenge levels with the mouthful modes where you'd have to like use the cone to like stab a water pipe and have it
Yeah.
like shoot you up. And if you were fast, then you could like stab the water pipe again before you even fell. It was really so much fun. I really mouthful mode was a really good idea, and it's a testament to Nintendo's both art direction and game design that an idea that should have been dumb worked really, really well. I really enjoyed everything. I enjoyed all like you said, it breaks up the game perfectly. It doesn't feel like they're relying on it too much. It doesn't feel like they are using it only too little. Like I think of New Super Mario Bros. On the DS. One of the ways they advertise it to you is like you see Mario huge and he's running through levels and bowling things over. It's a really cool idea. And then Nintendo realized we can't do this too often because it completely ruins the game. Like we can't make design levels around this as often as we'd like to. So you see it like twice in the entire game out of it. It's a pretty large game as well, and you only see it once or twice. I'm glad they didn't do that. I'm glad they didn't just put mouthful mode in as like a sales gimmick and then never touch it again. They use it like they used it in the perfect amount. It really was. I'm with you on that.
The whole game is
Uh,
very measured in that way.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now let's kind of move on to what are some of your favorite worlds that you explore. I don't have the list in front of me, so I'm kind of blanking on all the different ones. I know actually specifically which one I ended up enjoying the most, but I'm curious about you. Which world did you enjoy the most?
You know, for the most part, I liked all of them, but the one that I kind of couldn't get out of my head, the one that I would dream about, because I was playing this thing 5 or 6 hours a day, 5 days in a row. So this game became my life for a little bit. The one that really stuck out to me is the circus, the carnival area, the
Mm,
roller coaster, the amusement park. It was the music. I think it's the best music in the game. There, you know, you've got your mix of your roller coasters. You've got your mix of your carousels, and then the dark area with the monsters that pop out with you. And I think if you're going for the idea and the theme of an abandoned, forgotten land, I said at the very beginning of the game before I even saw anything, I said, if this is all about a forgotten land, we're going to see a carnival. We're going to see an amusement park. It just makes
mm-hmm.
way too much sense. There's the whole idea of an abandoned amusement park has a certain kind of like unique perspective to it. Like people, I think like that. Have you seen those YouTube videos of urban explorers where they go into
Yeah,
abandoned like theme parks and
I
stuff like that?
actually saw one of my old high school before it got torn down, and it's very surreal because the first time I saw my old high school was not torn down, and now it is. So I look that's the only way I can actually see the inside of my old high school anymore. It's really weird.
It's there's something like about the human imagination that gets slightly scared, but also slightly like curious. Like I can't help
Hmm.
but look for it. It's like if you see people going into like abandoned Sears or Kmart's, there's something very nostalgic about it, and there is something scary about. Well, it's dark, it's not illuminated. There's the architecture is falling apart, but that's what makes it so compelling as a location. And I think that especially in this game, they really utilized it to its full extent, in my opinion, of having it be still kind of bright, and then having the darker sections. But for the most part, I think that it has a really, really great balance of utilizing the what you could what you could do inside of this theme park versus how it looks versus the art direction. Like this was really where the game came into focus to me when I started to realize what I had on my hands. And I think it's when you're thinking to what a typical platformer has, right? The fire level, the ice level, the industrial type level. This game has all of that, but it's all industrial themed. It's all abandoned themed.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
you can finally kind of like maybe change and differentiate the formula a little bit. And so you do typically have a circus level in platforming games. It's, all the way back to Sonic 3. You just have that.
Hmm.
It's and so seeing it here presented in a slightly unique way really went a long way to endearing this game to me.
For me, I'd have to say it was the second world, Everbay Coast. I'm not even so it's weird for me to say that because I don't like the beach in the real world. I am bored to tears by the beach. In fact, I have some jokes with other podcasters about like I have a handful of rants that I go on where I rant about why the beach is a waste of time and why fireworks are useless. I get bizarrely animated, even if I'm not actually that upset by either of them, but I get bizarrely animated about both of those. But I like the beach one just because the industrial parts of it were super fun for me. The I found like a lot like it's not an underwater level, but it's their version of a water level, like, and that's the best part because underwater levels are awful. So they made a water themed world without making you do a lot of like heavy underwater segments. And I think that's great. I don't think there is any underwater segments in this game. I think because as soon as you jump on the water as Kirby, he goes into like this little flotation device. I'm pretty sure there's not even any underwater segments to this game. But I just really enjoyed this world. I love the visuals. I like how bright and colorful it is. I like the enemy types. I like I'm even looking at one right now where like a screenshot right now where Kirby is going down through like this canal looking waterway thing, and there's these like half circle, or not these pipes that you can dodge enemies through and collect more coins and stuff. I don't know. I loved this world a lot. I think the reason I like it so much is I remember specifically the first time I ever saw this game was you streaming it. And specifically, it was fast flowing waterworks with the level that you were streaming. It's World 2, Level 4. And I really enjoyed this this stage a lot. And it was fun to me. It was fun for me to watch you try to figure out what you wanted to do with it. And it was fun for me on my end to play through it for the first time. So I really enjoyed World 2 a lot for that reason.
I think this also ties into what I was saying earlier about like when you're a kid looking around at stuff, trying to imagine what it would be like in a video game form. If you're doing an abandoned world and you're doing a water level in an abandoned world, like a water treatment plant or an area like that is like the perfect place to do it. And it's kind of like activating this part of your maybe this dormant part of an adult's imagination, while at the same time indulging what a kid would think about the world around him and thinking about how it could be translated into video game form. And I think that the world design in this game is very unique in that perspective amongst a lot of contemporary platformers and their ability to kind of realize that dream. And so I do also really like the second world the same way you do, probably because of that. And I remember specifically when I was playing that level that you're talking about, it was really fun to figure all that out.
I think you brought like really think your point of how they kind of took all of the normal things that you would see, the normal tropes that you would see in platformers, not flip it necessarily on its head, but just kind of change the angle of how they look at it. Just kind of look at it from a bit more adjacent. And the fact that they kind of took all of those and turned them into like, what if this was an industrialized version of this? Because this is the Forgotten Land. So, I mean, the first thing, natural plains. You think of like even like Super Mario World, that's like one of the donut plains is like the first area of that. Then you have Everbay Coast, and that's very much like the very next area of Mario World where there's a little bit more water involved. Then you have Wandaria, which is the like you mentioned before, that's the circus type of thing. Winter Horns, your winter/snow level, and while it does have ice physics, it's not that obnoxious. They don't really rely on ice physics to provide challenge, which is that's generally what old platformers would do. Oh, you're in the ice level now. Oh, well, everything's slippy and slidey because that's fun, right? You know, that's how we'll make it challenging. Make you lose the ability to control your character in the way that we've trained you to for the last like 3 levels, three
Yeah, Sonic,
worlds.
Sonic in the Labyrinth Zone comes to mind. Take all of his
Mhm.
speed away, make him slow, and make everything kill you under the water. Aren't you having fun yet?
So much fun. And then you have a desert world, which with the like original wasteland, and then finally Redgar Forbidden Lands. It's pretty much your fire level, um, but just kind of in a different way.
I really like in that desert level how there's like a little resort there, like in the middle.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a challenge in one of those levels for sleeping next to one of the sleeping enemies in one of those chairs by a pool, and
I
it's just
did
like
that. Yeah.
it's like those little details that really they don't seem super important on the face of it, but when you're in the moment exploring these levels, finding the cute little side stuff like that goes a long way to giving the game a lot more character, and it makes it stand out. I think, especially in modern gaming today, such as it is.
No, I'm with you on that. I'm with you. But I don't really have much else to talk about with this game. I mean, the soundtrack is good. I joked with you off mic. I don't know how to describe music, which is weird because a lot of the guests I've had on are composers, and I somehow find a way to ask very specific music questions to them. But when it comes to describing music in a game, I'm like, this is sounds nice to me. It's pretty ears.
I can take a crack at it if you want. I'm not a composer or anything, but I the music did make me feel a certain kind of way. If you don't mind,
No, go for it.
I think that a criticism that I have in particular about Breath of the Wild is that a part of the reason why I like Zelda games is for the sweeping orchestral music. And that's, probably because I played a lot more modern Zelda. I like strong, forward, hard hitting, simple themes. Themes that just even a layman like myself, because I am very much a layman, can understand, can recognize being referenced throughout the game. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is very much the kind of musical direction that I'm looking for in a video game. Even at the very very start in the first level, at first it's dead silent. There's no music. If you're walking towards the city, you can hear the birds in the background whistling the main theme to the game. They're singing the main theme to the game. And then there's a callback all the way at the end of the game when you're climbing up the rafters to the final boss of the
Hmm.
wind blowing through the rafters, blowing the main theme to the game. There's very
Wow.
there's very small details like that where themes get picked up and put in different spots, very slight twist depending on where you are in the game. And even if you don't recognize exactly what's going on, even if you're playing with the volume kind of low or it just doesn't matter that much to you, I think that the soundtrack of this game does a really good job of taking you on a journey along with the game, and you might feel something when you hear this music and not even realize what it is. It's the game kind of not tugging you along, not pulling you along, but guiding you. Much like
Hmm.
every other aspect of this game is made to guide you. Very strong, simple to understand, forward-facing themes that can connect and hook into a player's imagination and take them along for this journey. And by the end of it, when you're fighting the final boss and you hear the invincibility theme playing as you have the truck, you know what that means at this point. You've been through it so many times before. You know when you're 18 wheeler Kirby that you're unstoppable. You know
I
that
totally forget. That was so stressful when I played that. I thought I was going to die. Oh
that
my god, it was terrible. Sorry, go on. I'm reliving the stress of that moment, but in a good way. Like, I really enjoyed that ending. Sorry, go on.
It was high energy for sure. People were going crazy in chat. Like, we couldn't believe what we were seeing. It was like an anime ending. Somebody was saying in chat, this is like Dragon Ball Z. Kirby's
Yeah.
just gonna Dragon Ball Z his way to the enemy, throwing a freaking planet at him. Throwing a planet at Kirby, and he's gonna turn into an 18-wheeler. That's when we figured out 18-wheelers versus planets. 18-wheelers are gonna win every time, apparently, according to Kirby lore.
I mean, in Kirby lore is gospel.
Yeah, pretty much. But all that to wrap that portion up, the music, even as someone, I have basically no music background. I was in marching band when I was like a kid, but I mean, that's like, that's not really the same thing. I just know that as a layman with very little understanding of this, of how music works, of what it's supposed to do, I got a feeling from this soundtrack, a feeling that I don't get very often in gaming, where I would dream about music and I heard the carnival theme a lot. Maybe it's just because I streamed multiple days in a row for 5 to 6 hours, sometimes more. Maybe that has something to do with it, but it was not
It
a
could
bad way.
be.
It was not in a bad way. It was in a very good way, and I love the soundtrack for this game so much so that if Nintendo ever were to, deem it fit for a physical release, I may be inclined to buy it if Nintendo would allow me to do that uh, one
It's
day.
so weird. It's so weird that they don't allow you to buy. Like, I understand they don't want people to have it up on YouTube, but if you don't offer a way for people to buy your soundtrack, what's wrong with you? Like, I make like you could make you. It's easy money. It's easy money. It's very little work you have to do. You could put it up on iTunes. I don't even use. Is iTunes still a thing? I don't know.
iTunes is still a thing, kind of.
It's the Apple Store now, I guess, whatever it is. But yeah, it's I don't know. It seems weird to me that they don't do that. But yeah, no, I'm with you. The music for me, it just made me feel very happy. I can't remember a lot of the melodies, but as soon as you mentioned the invincibility melody, that like I could hear it immediately in my head, and that's just good writing, plain and simple. Like you can think about a moment and that music will bring, and you can hear the music in your head from that moment.
It was really beautiful. It was really special, and not to hammer this point too hard, but this kind of is like the whole theme of the episode now. Nintendo not offering something to be available for purchase also has an unintended effect of something kind of being lost to time when it shouldn't be. This game is really important, I think, for a lot of reasons, and I think as we get further away from it, more people will begin to realize that. And I think the music in this game is a big part of that. I would just hate to have a situation where this never officially goes on sale, the soundtrack, and then, in the future, it's like people are just like, what? What game are you talking about? I mean, it wasn't a part of what they grew up with. Imagine a kid being born 20 years from now. A kid being born 20 years from now, this game is going to be long retro for him. Long retro. He would really need to dig into the backlog. And gaming is still a very young medium. We still have a lot of people in the medium of gaming who were there from the beginning. That
Mm-hmm.
means this thing is as young as it gets. Like, we are not to the point that theater, film, books, we're not there yet. But there's going to come a time where, like, people don't even really know what the classics were. Our classics will be seen as like ancient, forms of text that are illegible. And I want this game to stand the test of time. I want this game to not to be more than a historical footnote. I want it to be remembered by generations to come. And I think that it's a little short sighted. This iron grip Nintendo sometimes has over their properties. I want them to realize there's a lot more to it than just the way that you want a person, an individual, to enjoy it. There is a responsibility I feel that we must have as people, as humans, as caretakers of this work of our genius, these video games that people have made. I don't want them to become abandonware. I don't want them to become lost to time, forgotten. That'd be the worst thing, wouldn't it? If Kirby and the
Mm-hmm.
Forgotten Land and the far flung 30, 40, 50 years from now, if people just don't even think about it, if it's just gone from all public consciousness. That's why it's important for me that these kinds of things go on sale. These kinds of, it may seem trite, but I do think gaming is an art that is important to preserve. It's one of the core
Mm-hmm.
tenets of my channel. And so playing Kirby in the Forgotten Land, there is a part of me that thinks this could become a Forgotten Land one day. These Switch cartridges are really cheaply made. They have a lifespan of like 10 years or 12 years or something, I was reading.
Same with the DS games. Yeah.
The DS games are starting to die right now too, I've been reading. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we know we can't count on Nintendo for anything digital. Like, we can't count on them for that. I mean, that's up in the air. I don't really even know what our digital rights are, if any. Probably none.
I mean, generally, when you buy physical or digital, you don't own the game. You own a license to play the game, and they can revoke that license at will, which is just terrifying to think about. Um, it's just yeah, it's not. And the only reason that they don't, obviously, because it would cause like a huge uproar, and they would lose so much. There would be so much consumer faith lost that it wouldn't be. It would cost them more money to do that than it would save them by taking games. It makes no sense for them to do that because they already paid the money. Like the person already, yeah, whatever. But it is a video game preservation, and we could do a whole episode on this. I've done an episode on video game history and preservation. It's a very large and nebulous topic because it's a combination of preserving a lot of different things. And this is how we'll kind of end it on this, and I'll bring this up, and then we'll do our wrap up real quick here. But video game preservation, I think, is pretty much broken down into three facets, and I get this from the Video Game History Foundation. I'm not taking credit for this. It is physical preservation, digital preservation, and contextual or cultural preservation. So physical, obviously, your cartridges, your discs, your if you have one of them, the cassette tape games from back in the late 80s, you know what I'm talking, floppy disk,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call. That's physical preservation. Keeping and it doesn't even have to be just the games. It could be keeping the physical, like the original pieces of art, the original the ephemera surrounding video games. Like I think the one of the cool things they have at the Game History Foundation is the original court filings for Nintendo Universal versus Nintendo with the Donkey Kong lawsuit, like stuff like that. Like they have those types of things preserved physically. Digital preservation is the digital version of that, either dumping ROMs onto the internet, onto like the Internet Archive, or places that are easily, like, once it's on the internet, it's pretty much everywhere in the world at the same time. It's digital preservation. Contextual preservation is a lot harder to quantify. It's a lot harder to deal with. Technically, what we just did, this hour and a half long episode, is contextual preservation. We are firsthand accounts of this experience and what the game press was saying about the game at the time and what the public reception was about it at the time. And we can talk about that because we experienced it and we have it saved for posterity here on this lovely podcast right here. But it is, with that said, that's one form of contextual preservation, but it's hard to really define, like, what is that. Like the example that I like to give is World of Warcraft. How do you contextually preserve World of Warcraft? There's hundreds of thousands of millions of interactions with people every single day in chat logs and voice chat outside of the game. Like there are websites that were built to help guilds run more smoothly and organize things. Like they're like that's a whole lot of culture and context and just life that happened in the world, in this digital world, that's impossible to preserve. And you can make the argument, should everything really be preserved? And arguably 90% of it, no, but you don't know what's going to be important in 100, in like 20, 30 years. You're like, will people give a shit about the Leroy Jenkins video in 100 years? Like, I don't know. Will that be something that's like a joke still, like 100 years from now? I don't know. Is it a joke now with kids younger? Do they even know who Leroy Jenkins is? Some people do. Some people, I don't know. It's a very nebulous topic, but it's definitely something that's always worth trying to preserve to the best of your ability. But with all that said, we are going to wrap this up. We have talked about this game for a good solid hour and a half. We have covered everything I can possibly think of, and in a lot of great detail. This was a lot of fun, Morgan. Thank you so much for doing this. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is that you are someone that when I watch you on stream, you're very insightful. You are good at looking at mechanics of the game and like describing how not only that it works on a very technical level, like, it's well designed for A, B, and C reasons, but you also have very good emotional intelligence in the sense that you're able to describe why a mechanic makes you on a personal level, you personally feel a certain way. And that's why I wanted you on this episode, because you you're very articulate and you're a good way at describing how games make you feel. And this episode, I really think illustrated that. I really enjoyed having you on. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem, man. I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad this is the game that we get to talk about because I have a lot of feelings about this game, and I was really happy and glad to have played it. If you ever want to come check me out, I'm at twitch.tv/intergalactic pinecone. I stream. I'm loath to say that I stream Monday through Friday or to give myself any kind of schedule because I just stream so often. Like you're probably just gonna find me on at around like 2 p.m. Pacific Standard. I'll probably just be on the majority of the time at around that time. And I also have a podcast that 2 episodes have come out now called the Intergalactic Pinecast. And you can find that Intergalactic Pinecast on all podcasting apps and on YouTube, where we just sort of talk about whatever I want to talk about, gaming related. Sometimes not, but for the majority of the time, yeah, gaming related. And it's always open to guests. And email me at askthepinecone@gmail.com if you want to have any kind of inquiries.
So yes, everyone, please go follow him on all those places. I actually watch Morgan stream quite a bit, and that's saying something because I don't watch a lot of streams, and I'm not saying that just to be nice to Morgan. I'm genuinely serious about that. I don't watch a lot of streams. So go check out his stuff. As usual for me, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to email me, you can email me stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can do that in a number of ways. You can give it a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts because that helps more people find the show, or whichever podcasting app you use. If you give it a 5-star rating review on them, it helps more people find the show, and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. If you want to support the show monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod for just $1 a month. You'll get all the episodes a few days earlier and at a higher bit rate. You'll also get access to a patron exclusive Discord. And for $5 a month, you'll get all of that plus 2 bonus episodes a month. So patreon.com/stillloadingpod. But the most important shout out is the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care in hospitals. So if you want to go support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. And that will do it for this episode of Still Loading. Morgan, once again, thank you so much for joining me.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. Love talking platformers. It's somewhat of a specialty of mine.
I'm going to have you. Oh, we should do a platformer. Oh, I have ideas. I'll talk to you after we're done recording this. That's it for this episode. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you all next time.
Bye.